Thank you. Thanks. Is Bollywood an influence on my style? Yeah, I'd say so. Not so much with this drawing, but in general, he's one of my favorite comic book artists. Yeah, on some of the more classic covers I've done, where I go for that like classic style. He's a pretty heavy influence. Um, like the Guardians of the Galaxy series that I did that looked more like a 50s comic. Uh, those ones were pretty much just, you know, Bollywood copies. Thoughts on Steve Ditko? I mean, he co-created Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, like two of the best comic book characters ever. Uh, the guy. I don't know. Uh, what did I have? I had Amazing Spider-Man number 33 when I was a kid. It was my dad's copy, but I read that thing over and over and over again. And at the time, I didn't have many other Spider-Man comics, so I didn't realize like what a classic that was. I just thought, it was just some random comic. But I think you know, a lot of the feelings I have for Spider-Man come from that comic and from his work in particular. You know, when I started working on Spider-Man, I read a lot of the classic stuff, and I didn't get too far into the Ramita run. I got like a little bit of it, but I read every single Ditko issue because there's just I don't know that to me that's who Spider-Man is. I love Ramita stuff, and in fact, the kind of the way I look at it is when I draw Peter Parker, I am channeling Ditko, and when I'm drawing Spider-Man, I'm probably channeling Ramita. It's just Ramita's the one who seems to have codified the costume. He made it, I guess, the most iconic, and just really made it, I don't know, something that it wasn't before. You know, the way Ditko drew it, it was almost kind of creepy, which I like. But when most people think of Spider-Man, they think of the Ramita style. Um, you know, and when I did worked on Mythos Spider-Man, I kind of went for both. You know, I did two different costumes, and one was more uh, the Ramita style, and one was more Ditko. Oh, the Weird Science tribute cover. Thank you. Was my father an inker? Yeah. Well, my dad did. He did all kinds of stuff. So he did caricatures back in the 80s, maybe even the 70s too. He did airbrush T-shirts, um, and since about 95, he's been working doing custom motorcycles. So that was, could he learn how to use Photoshop? That was the bigger challenge. But he learned how to scan and email me. Email is still a tough thing for him, but inking is not. Uh, yeah, I mean I think he likes inking because it's actually pretty relaxing. Like what I'm doing right now, I can kind of I can turn the logic part of my brain off, and I can have a conversation with someone. But if I were actually drawing the thing instead of just inking him, I wouldn't be able to talk and do it at the same time. And I think you'll find that's true with a lot of artists. So that's one reason my dad likes inking because, I send him some pretty tight pencils and he can turn on an audio book and just, ink all day and learn something in the process. And that's actually what, both of us do. We share an Audible account and we read a lot of the same books and we just kind of work all day and listen. Let's see. What kind of brush am I using? This is a Pentel Pocket Brush. Do I prefer the original red and black or the classic red and blue on Spidey? Um, I prefer the more muted blue. So whenever I do Spider-Man, it's he's blue and red, but it's kind of like black with blue highlights. If that makes sense. That's just always the way I've drawn them. The bright blue I think came in the is it the Bronze Age? It was like 70s Spider-Man, and I actually never really got into those stories. I just never made it that far. I read all the 60s stuff, and then after Ditko left, only a little bit of Ramita. Is there any chance we'll get to see you do Spider-Man again? Oh, thanks. Spidey again. Yeah, I mean, I do, I've got some covers in the pipeline. I did a cover for number 800. As far as the, actual book, no guarantees. We'll see. I'm still in contact with all those editors. In fact, Nick Lowe just emailed me the other day, although it wasn't for a Spidey character, it was for something else, which I might do. We'll see. Um, but for me, the way things stand now, I just, I don't know. There's a lot of other stuff that's calling my name right now. Like I've done Spidey. I want to try some other stuff. And mostly right now, I don't know. I'm in kind of a holding pattern at the moment. That's why I've been getting so many commissions done lately. Because I'm waiting to hear from a client who's not getting back to me. So whenever that's the case, that's time to get some commissions all done. Because these commissions are actually old ones from New York Comic Con last year. I'm sorry, there were some other questions there, but I missed them. Let's see. I'm making the Pentel brush look easy. I don't know. I've heard some people don't like it. I'll show you guys like a real close up. Um, I don't know. I really like the way it handles, and it's got nice cartridges that are easy to change, and the ink is pretty black. Yeah, I mean, I've been real happy with it. They do make some that are different. Let's see. Do you use Pocket Brush on sequential work as well? I used to only. Will I ever totally painted book again? No. Sorry. Yeah, that I can give you a firm no. I've considered doing like I could do like an illustrated book, um, where I'm doing supplemental illustrations to a prose narrative. But yeah, no graphic novels. It just takes way too long. Like it takes long enough for me to do it in pencil and ink. So, you basically just add on two, three times as much time, and you know, it just takes a long, long time to paint something. Now, I might consider if someone penciled it, I could consider doing it. But it's just such an investment of my time. I'd rather tell more stories for the amount of work it takes. Oh, thank you. All right, time to do this hand. Usually I don't do hands in my commissions, but if it's an easy character, like the thing, then I'll go ahead and throw one in there. Basic tips on keeping a composition clean and not messy. Yeah, break everything down into silhouettes. Look at Toth. Am I painting this? Yes. Yeah, this as soon as I finish inking, then I will watercolor it. Um, I don't know if I can do that live. We'll see. This is kind of an experiment. I wanted to try Facebook Live to see what kind of audience I can get and if I'm happy. If, first of all, if it records everything, and second of all, if I'm happy with the recording, then I might do more of it. Has anyone ever used Twitch? I've seen a lot of other artists use that, and I wasn't sure what the benefit was. All right, slowly getting things done. Apologies if I keep uh, going in and out. I think my internet is going a little slower than I had hoped. Mainly gamers on Twitch? Okay. Yeah, because I've seen some artists do it, and I just wonder if there was something different about Twitch that made it better, or if it's just like any other social media. Because what I like about Periscope is that it saves it at the end. Oh, Nahuel? Is that how I say your name? Yeah, we had a tough time getting the Guardians print to you. You guys are what, in Argentina? Yeah, that was. I'm glad I finally got to you. I was pretty worried there for a second. What was the other question I saw? Can I talk about Spider-Man one moment in time? The blue one. That was one of the few times where like everything just clicked. Um, it was the last cover for the series, and I can't remember at what point I did it, but I think I had read most of the script, so I knew what was going to happen. And I don't know, it just came to me. I did one sketch, sent it to Tom Brevoort, and he said, "Let's do it." What's that last question? The Holbein watercolors cover the line art since some pigments are slightly opaque. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I mostly choose transparent pigments in general. And that's not too much of an issue. The only time I really had to find the right one was with red. And so I can actually show you. Let's see. So this is all my gouache, and then watercolors up here. So I use vermilion hue, but that's not the main one. This is the main one. Come on, focus. Permanent red. It's a Holbein watercolor, and this is the best one I've found for giving you a super bright red that is also not too opaque. So in general, I don't use any cadmiums or anything like that. Yes, this is Pentel Pocket Brush, and it is filled with the regular cartridges. I don't change anything. I've noticed like some people will complain about them, saying like the it's not waterproof or that the watercolor makes it bleed, but I've never had that problem. I've been using this thing. This is the same one I've had for years and years, and it still works great. And it's still using, the same cartridges that I bought when I first got it. No problem. I'm just glad you got the print. Like I said, I was really worried about it there for a while because I didn't know what was happening. They have tracking on it, but the tracking wasn't working. So I'm just glad you got it. Yeah, that's kind of one of the coolest things about comics and the internet and all that stuff now is that, somebody can, like, I can connect with somebody. Um, I think I've got it. They have a couple different ones, but this is one. Um, the Kuretake. This one you have to be careful with because this one is not waterproof. There is one that is waterproof, but I haven't used it that much. But this one I used on Hellboy was the last project I used it on, where it was really helpful for a lot of like um, little details and whatnot. Because the brush pen is great, but when you get really tiny, um, it's faster. Like you can still do it, but it's a lot faster to just use a felt tip pen, which is what the Kuretake is. I think Kuretake makes a nylon brush filament or a nylon filament brush, but I prefer this one, and I prefer the ink on this one. But Pentel also makes the art brush, which is something different, and that ink is not waterproof. Pardon me for a second, guys. I gotta turn on the fan. It's getting hot in here. In the meantime, you can look at my gun collection. Oh. All right. Oh, no problem. Thank you. And thank your girlfriend too. That was it was really sweet. I'm glad you guys liked it. The Kuretake Zig Clean color. I haven't tried that one. So I've got this one, and then I've got, you guys can see a little bit of my setup here. I think, oh, let's see. There we go. I think this one is a brush pen. Yeah. I like the design of these, but I haven't used them that much. And I can't remember if it's waterproof or not. The main thing is you just always have to test it. Because if you don't test it, well, shame on you. All right, now we're getting into the part where I have to decide what to ink and what not to ink. Yeah, where I have to kind of step back and just try and imagine what will look decent. I mean, the drawing's pretty much there, so I don't have to worry too much. I had somewhat of an idea of what to do. Have you ever colored with Copics? Yes, definitely. I got a bunch up there. Do I prefer drawing movie versions of characters or the comic version? Well, I will answer the question by telling you my commission's policy. If it's a movie character or likeness, I charge more money. I definitely enjoy those designs and think they're great, uh, but they are definitely more difficult to draw and take more time. So I'm usually, I'm happy to do them, but it always adds, almost an hour or two of extra work. Not only because they're more complicated, but also because you have to look up the reference, because if you tell me to draw the thing, I did look up reference for this because he wanted specifically a Kirby look, a Joe Sinnott look. So I did look up reference for this. But, if someone asked me to draw Daredevil, I can draw Daredevil without looking at anything. But if someone asks me to draw Daredevil from the Netflix show, well, then I'm gonna have to spend at least 15 minutes, you know, finding the right angle, finding the right pick, the right lighting, all that kind of stuff. And, it just adds time. So, people are willing to pay for it, so it's not that big of an issue. But it's typically, I think I do a $50 surcharge. Whereas with the thing, even though I'm doing a head sketch, I know he's going to be easy, so I'll throw the hand in there just because he's so easy to draw. The thing, he's just fun. Lots of little rocks, lots of little shadows. It's just a little bit more mindless, which means I can talk to you guys. And not to mention, hold a camera while I'm doing it. Have I played any superhero games? My days of playing games are long gone, I'm afraid. I just don't have time for it. And I was heavy into it when I was a kid. Every Christmas I would ask my parents for either a new console or a new video game, and usually they'd get it for me. But yeah, that hasn't been the case for many years. There was a brief point in the mid 2000s when I was living with a bunch of dudes. Actually, the living with a bunch of dudes was not a brief point. That was 8.5 years. But there was a brief point within those 8.5 years where somebody got, I think it was a Sega Saturn, or one of our neighbors was getting rid of his. And so he gave it to us, and we played Soul Calibur quite a bit, way more than I had time for, and that's ultimately why I had to quit, because it just takes too much time. So much time. You really, something's got to give. Like my daughter, she's 3. She's at daycare right now. Uh, I I couldn't do this job if we didn't pay for daycare and all that, because that's a full-time job in and of itself. Let's see. Can I set this straight for you? My teachers give me conflicting answers. When drawing a comic page, do you line up? Oh, hold on, disappearing. When drawing a comic page, do you line up the panel borders to the copy line, the trim line, or just rule out 10 by 15? Borders. I do it, well, kind of depends. For the most part, if you're just doing, you know what? Now that I think about it, I changed the way I did it. I was drawing to the copy line, and what I do now is I go a little bit inside of it. Because what I did on, let's say, I think it was Hellboy, I was actually, in my inset panels, they had a border around them. So I wanted to give myself a little bit more space for those inset panels and the bleeds. So I would normally line it up with the copy line, but instead I would go one panel border width, the gutter, uh, inside of that, and then I'd start there. It's kind of tough to say without showing you guys. Do I have any? I don't think I have any Hellboy pages with me. Otherwise, I could show you. But yeah, ultimately, it just comes down to personal preference. I've seen people do it all different ways. I think the standard is to draw to the copy line, um, because it's called copy safe. So any graphics that you have, it'll be safe within that border. So that's a pretty good way to start. But other than that, there's a lot of leeway. There's a lot of different things you can try. Take inspiration techniques from anime or manga. I wasn't that heavy into it, um, but I didn't dislike it. And we're just celebrating the 30th anniversary of Akira right now, and that had a huge influence on me. Yeah, Akira, I saw just randomly one Saturday morning, the Sci-Fi Channel. I'd watch my cartoons every Saturday, and this is when I was a teenager. I love the X-Men and I love the Tick. Um, but one morning they had on Akira because they would show an anime movie every Saturday, and I just happened to see it and it blew my mind. But then what I remember next is I watched it the next Saturday, and they did some different, some other movie, which of course, wasn't nearly as good. So, like, I could have been like the world's biggest anime fan, but because what I watched next wasn't as good, I just never got into it. Katsuya Terada, the name is ringing a bell, but I can't remember who that is. I think I was really impressed by the work, but I don't remember the name. I can't think of the artwork offhand, so I just don't know it well enough. But he was good enough for me to remember the name. I'll put it that way. There's so much stuff out there these days. I can barely keep track. But that's what's great about it. How to properly clean and store a brush? Well, this I just put the cap on. As far as my watercolor brushes, I just make sure there's, sometimes if I'm just using watercolor or gouache, I don't even wash it. I just make sure that uh, you know, it's thoroughly wet, and then I just kind of leave it there. But if I'm using acrylic, like I was using acrylic yesterday, you have to wash it if you're using acrylic or ink. But that's one reason I love the Pentel Pocket Brush so much is because you put the cap on it, and because of that, it never really dries out. How did I get started in comics? Well, I I wrote about the entire process on my blog. So if you go to my blog, paularivera.com, and search for Breaking In, there's a two-part blog post where I talk about how I did it. But basically, I went to a comic convention when I was 17 years old. I was in high school. I met Jim Kruger and Alex Ross. They were signing for Earth X, which had just come out. This was 1999. And I met Jim. I gave him some artwork. And I think I emailed him too. I think there was like a contest at Marvel or something. And I think that's how I got in contact with him. And I just kept doing work for him over the years. He had his own, um, intellectual property, IP, whatever, his own book, creator own story. And I just did some work for him over the years. And by the time I was in college, he introduced me to Marvel. And I went in. He actually brought me into the office, met some editors, and while no one gave me any work, I did get Casada's email and sent him some portfolio pieces. He got back to me the next day and said, "You're hired." So, you know, basically, it's just about getting your work out there, and the main thing is just making sure your work is of a professional quality. I mean, that's the real challenge. Everyone I've met, even in the last 10 years, whose work was good, they've gotten work. So it's more like the real challenge is getting better at drawing. You know, the tough part is actually not breaking in. It's doing the work. Um, you know, I've met people who, you know, weren't good enough, but thought they were, and you know, they just have to take the time and get better. And that's the other good thing is that I've seen people who weren't good enough get good enough, and eventually break in. You know, each artist and you know each writer is going to have a completely different story for how they made it, which is it makes things exciting. But if you're young and trying to figure out how to do it, that doesn't really help you. So you just got to concentrate on what does work, which is making good work. It's the only thing I can guarantee. If I could work on any book for any length of time, always want to do some Silver Surfer. I've always wanted to do some Batman. Um, and you know, the thing is, I'm at a point in my career where I've been offered most of the things that I wanted to do, and the reason I haven't done a lot of it is just because I couldn't find the time, because I'm not particularly fast, and I am particularly scared of not hitting my deadline. So if I don't think I can hit a deadline, I will say no to a project. And so, you know, I've been offered Batman before, and I didn't think I could do it, and so I had to say no. So if that ever happens again and the timing works out, then I would definitely jump on that. You know, I've been offered Spidey since I left. You know, I was on Daredevil and back in 2012. I do wish I had stayed on that a little bit longer, just because it was just such a great team to be on. Like everything was perfect, and I had to leave. All right. Let's see. I think we're almost done. I think we're almost ready for ink. I mean, for watercolor. Do you guys want to stay for watercolor? If we do that, I can't talk. If I do watercolor, I gotta just set this up and go at it. All right, I'll do some watercolor. Any suggestions on how to study anatomy? Yeah, do some sculpture. It's the best way. Because I mean, really, you know, what artists are doing is they're thinking about creatures and figures, you know, in 3 dimensions. That's what comic book artists are actually doing. So, you know, do some sculpture. I do these little heads. I haven't done them in a while, but it's stuff called Super Sculpey Firm. On my blog, I have, you know, all the tools and stuff necessary for it. Just look under the sculpture heading. And, you know, there's no faster way to learn anatomy. All right, I'm gonna add a couple more shadows here. Yeah, didn't really finish the neck before. Can I add watercolor over the Kuretake brush pens? Only some of them. So, as with anything, always test it first. So before you go and do, you know, a fully rendered drawing, just do it on a strip of paper, do a couple test runs, and then add some color on top and see what happens. because some of them are waterproof, some of them are not. If you go to jetpens.com, they have all kinds of wonderful brushes and pens and whatnot, and they also will list whether or not the ink is waterproof. Uh, Keeping your ink lines from looking stale. I have no idea. I just ink, and yeah, I don't really. One thing that could help is try some sketching in ink, where you're not just tracing pencil lines. You're actually thinking and drawing in ink. That's one exercise that might help. Is it worth attempting to get a career in drawing? God, I don't know, dude. I've been very successful, thankfully, but there's no guarantee. So, my main advice, and this goes for pretty much everything in life, start small. You know, um, try getting little jobs here and there. If it works, if you get good feedback, keep going for it. Um, but yeah, there's just no guarantees. And the thing is even if you are super successful, it's not going to be the same as being successful in another industry. You might be happier, but you might not make as much money. But that's the case with pretty much every job. You know, the reason people get paid money to do things is because they're things that other people don't want to do. So when it comes to drawing and comics, well, there's a lot of people who want to do this and they would do it for free. So you're going to be competing with those people. And that's, not just here, that's across the states, everywhere. You're competing with people all over the world who want to do this. So it's fun. I love it. This is my dream job, but there are no guarantees. Yeah. Sorry if I'm too completely cynical. Yeah. Like I said, I do love this job. There's nothing else I would rather do. All right, let's see here. I think that's getting pretty good. I wish I hadn't done that mark, but it's not a life changer. All right, any thoughts on art college? That I don't always know if it's worth it. I did go to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, but I also had a nearly full scholarship. So I have very mixed feelings about art college because I saw kids, my classmates who went to the school and, you know, paid all that money, and there's no guarantee that you're going to come out with the skills because it's really more about your own personal struggle to become a better draftsperson. Uh, yeah, there's just no guarantee. It's not the same as like going and getting an accounting degree, where at the end you're guaranteed to be an accountant. Um, yeah, it's really tough. I'm planning to do a gouache video, but I've been planning that for years, so I don't know when I'll actually get around to doing it. If I do a gouache video, it is going to be something that I will sell, probably through Gumroad, probably through my blog, but we'll see. Yeah, because with that one, it's gonna have to be really long and involved, because gouache, although I love it, it can be a little tricky to start with. Yeah, yeah. I wish I hadn't done that. But what I'll do in the watercolor is this side's going to be dark. So I think what I was doing is I was thinking ahead and how I was going to do the shadow. And so this won't matter as much. This will be a plane that goes back in space. But yeah, if it were just going to be black and white, I would be more upset. Um, I don't think I'm going to ink the circle. I think I'll do that in watercolor. All right, let me see how I can do this comfortably and do water. Let me see here. All right, I gotta stand up. All right. Is that good? Can everybody see? I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. All right, guys. I can watercolor, but I can't read your comments as I'm doing it, so I'll just have to apologize. I won't be able to respond. But I can talk through the process. So right now I'm using my kneaded eraser, which is like clay. And I roll it up like a snake and then just go over the whole thing. And this is usually when I find out that I missed a line. If I were doing this in black and white, I think I would have treated the inking a little bit different. I would have tried to make this pop out more, either by keeping it light or making all this dark, but I think I can save it with the watercolor. So I missed a couple spots. I'm gonna get this part right here. And maybe that'll be good enough. Yep, that'll work. All right, I need my water, which is over here. And I think I'm gonna put this up. And then I'll use my magnets. This is a metal board that I'm drawing on. Let's see here. All right, we'll keep that up. And then I'll rotate a little bit so you guys can see more. All right. I'm going to take a little break and grab some water. I'll be right back. Alright guys, I'm coming back. Sorry about that. I got my water, now it won't be parched. And I got my brushes. Alright, for this I'm going to be using a silver brush, black velvet. It's a round number 12. I don't know if you guys can see that. I like these because they're color brushes. They're part natural hair, part synthetic, which is just a nice blend to have, especially for the big ones. The small ones don't hold up too well, but the big ones last for a very, very long time. You know, I've probably been using this for 10 years. Alright, so the thing, well, he's orange, so I'm going to use a lot of burnt sienna. I'm just going to get a base coat over the whole thing right now. It can be a good idea if you're watercoloring to keep another brush handy that doesn't have any paint on it. So I think I'm going to take my own advice and do that right now. So let's see. Yeah, so I'll take this brush. This is another silver brush. This is from the Kolinsky line, which is natural hair. It's a cheaper alternative to the Winsor & Newton Series 7 watercolor brushes. So I'll use that to, I kind of went over the line right here. So I'll just brush that out. You can see where it's, well, I don't know if you can see. Burnt sienna can get opaque if you let it. So when applying it, it's good to keep it nice and thin. And then that's why I'd use my other clear brush to kind of work things out. I guess we can go ahead and make the tongue orange too, because eventually that'll be much darker. And so I'm not thinking too much about light and dark right now, just because I know he's going to be orange everywhere. But we could start thinking about that. Uh-oh, I think I'm running out of batteries. Let me charge this guy. Let's see here. All right, that should give us power. Sometimes I use my finger to pick up excess pigment. You know, basically whatever works. And then I usually keep a little bit of scrap paper to the side so I can do some test strokes here and there. So the plan is I'll do burnt sienna over the whole thing, the whole thing. Sorry, you guys are gonna have to deal with my dad jokes. Over the whole thing, and then I'll go back in with some burnt umber and maybe some Payne's Gray, which is kind of like a cool, very dark, cool gray. It's basically like it's almost blue. Let's be real here, guys. Payne's Gray, it's blue. Let's be real. Basically, I'll be going for a two-tone style with this, which is generally how I color comics. I have tried doing single tone before, and I sometimes like the effect, but usually there's some kind of I want to define the light source, and I just find it easier to use a two-tone. You know, the thing about watercolor is you can do what looks like a single tone, but there are actually subtle gradations that you don't even notice. So it reads as being a single tone, but it actually will get darker in some spots. Yeah, when I worked on the Valiant 4-issue miniseries, the first issue I was doing kind of a single tone with like a transparent gray layer. And I liked that effect, but eventually I just got back into doing the full-on two-tone. All right, I think that's good enough for the base coat. Okay, now let's darken those eyes down. You know what I love about the thing is he's got those sunken eyes. So you want to make sure they're nice and dark. You know, it's still the whites of the eye, the sclera, but you know, they're in deep shadow. So I want to get them as dark as I can while they'll still read as white. And then we'll put in a red tongue. I love how he never really has teeth. I think he does have teeth, but Kirby almost never drew them in there. So he always has just this really weird expression that's, you know, doesn't look like anybody else. You know, that combined with a really strong brow. Alright, so now I'm getting some burnt umber, and as you can see, I already messed up. So if you mess up with watercolor, just add more water. And eventually that'll be I think I'm going to do a blue background, so that won't matter. But perhaps I should just be more careful in general. I might even use a darker, deeper brown. I think this is Van Dyke brown, because I don't want it to be saturated. You know, in general, you want the shadows to be less saturated in color. Just indicating like a little bit of a cast shadow here. You know, I don't want to put a shadow on every single rock, but it certainly does help pick out the form. Alright guys, I think I'm going to go for about another 5 more minutes. Or how about I'll go until 10:30 my time. That's a couple more minutes, and then if you guys have any last questions, I can see what I can answer. Because at this point, I think you can see pretty much where it's going. It's just a question of me rendering every single little rock, or at least most of them. And I still got to listen to the news today. Gotta get those blue eyes in there. Push that tongue back. Okay, guys. I'll bring down my camera, my phone. Any last questions before we go? How do I keep the water from buckling? This is a watercolor block. So these are all glued to each other. It's just free in one corner. And so it's basically taped all the way around. So when I'm doing something like an actual painting, I'll actually tape it down to a board ahead of time. But yeah, this is watercolor paper. I think, do I have the, no, oh wait, I do have it free. Give me a second. This is the watercolor that I'm using. Artistico Extra White by Ono. 300 grams per meter squared, 140-pound paper. The main thing is it's 100% cotton. Do I listen to music when I work? Most often I listen to audiobooks. I do listen to music sometimes. Lately, a lot of David Bowie and Peter Schilling. What is the most important skill to develop as an artist? Just being able to draw. Plain and simple. You know, the one thing I tell people is you got to sculpt. Sculpting is really the fastest way to learn it. But very expensive. What are you referring to? The paper? Yeah, 100% cotton paper is a lot more expensive, but it is worth it if you are doing watercolor. It's also more archival. You know, it responds to water a lot better. All right, anything else? Yeah, I might check out Twitch eventually. I just wanted to see YouTube because I already have an account and it was pretty easy to start streaming. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks for all the questions. And you guys can find me on YouTube, Twitter. I'm all over the place. And then today's Wacky Reference Wednesday. So on my blog, you can. I think today is Amazing Spider-Man number 800. I show the process and what reference went into it. So be sure and check that out. Otherwise, you guys have a good rest of the week. If you're going to San Diego Comic-Con, have an awesome time. I will not be there. I'll be at home doing commissions. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.